Negeri Jakarta.
Recording in progress.
My name's Howell Coleman, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this inaugural session of a Zoominar program, which we're organizing. There will be one meeting every month, we hope, and this is the first one today. Universitas Negeri Jakarta is situated in the mega city of Jakarta. The population of Jakarta is approximately 30 million, which is about the same as the population of Hungary and Switzerland and Czechia combined. So as you can imagine, it's a very dynamic and exciting city, and we have the best food in the world here. And before I introduce the speaker for today's session, I'd like to invite Professor Dedi Purwana, who is the director of the postgraduate school, to say a few words to launch us on our way. Professor Dedi.
Okay, thank you, Howell. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Do you hear my voice?
Yes, fine.
Pak Faisal or Howell?
Yes, I can hear clearly.
Very clear, Prof.
Terkendala jaringan.
Oh, there is connection problem.
Should we go directly to Pak Rector?
Hold on a second, Howell.
Sorry. The connection is very poor.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Vice Rector for Academic Affairs, Professor Siono, and also Vice Director for Student Affairs at Postgraduate of UNJ, Professor Arita, our college, our visiting lecturer at UNJ, Mr. Howell Coleman, Senior Lecturer at University of Leeds, United Kingdom, and also Dr. Martin Lam, our speaker. He is a Senior Lecturer at University of Leeds, United Kingdom. I'm very glad that we have Dr. Martin Lam, who spent the time for sharing with our student, our lecturer, in terms of post-academic situation related to teaching methodology. I would like to express my gratitude also to Pak Faisal and also Mr. Howell Coleman, who has initiated this program. Ladies and gentlemen, this program is, we call it International Zoominar series that we plan every month. We invite visiting lecturer from several countries to sharing their experience, their idea to our student and also our lecturer. So this moment, thank you for Dr. Martin Lam and also our beloved moderator, Professor Coleman, who in this event, I would like to congratulate Mr. Howell Coleman for his achievement to receive doctorate honoris causa from Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Bandung. This make me happy. then it will be our advantage for postgraduate program at Universitas Negeri Jakarta to have a best doctor honoris causa in our university. Again, I believe that this session will be benefit for our student and also our lecturer. Please enjoy it. And I would like to kindly ask Professor Suyono as a Vice Rector for Academic Affairs to integrate officially for this session. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bapak Suyono.
Langsung.
Ya.
Oke, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Director of Postgraduate UNJ, Professor Dedi Purwana, and our speaker for today's seminar, Dr. Martin Lam from the University of Leeds, and also Hywel Kuhlman, distinguished guests and participants. On behalf of the Director of UNJ, I'd like to welcome you to the monthly International Program Language, Society and Education. Ladies and gentlemen, 5 years ago, never have we imagined that we would be in a pandemic. It changed almost every aspect of our lives, especially in our teaching. We are forced to conduct our teaching online. Some of us may have had an early start. Some are still new online teaching and learning. It was not easy for us, and our students either. Through this difficult time, we were forced to adapt and to learn new knowledge and new skills. The use of technology in our teaching has become inevitable during pandemic and post-pandemic. We see that things are getting better in many countries. We hope that the pandemic will be over soon. Nevertheless, the role of technology will still be essential in our teaching and learning. Therefore, this seminar is important for us. Dr. Martin Lam will talk about the role of technology in post-pandemic, especially for language learners in Indonesia. I'd like to express my highest appreciation to the Postgraduate School UNJ for initiating this seminar, and also for our speaker, Dr. Martin Lam. Thank you very much for being here with us, speaking about the role of technology in post-pandemic education. I strongly believe that this seminar will provide an avenue to gain insights into the role of technology in our teaching. I hope all of you will have a wonderful seminar. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Suyono and Professor Dedi. And now, without more ado, I'll introduce Martin very briefly. He is a senior lecturer at the University of Leeds, as you already heard. His speciality is motivation, and he's done a lot of very innovative research into the motivation of English language learners in Indonesia, tracking people over long periods of time, and seeing how their attitudes to English and themselves as learners develop over time. Martin is also the editor of an important book which was published recently, the Palgrave Handbook of Motivation for Language Learners. Martin has long experience in Indonesia. We first met in 1984 when I was leaving Universitas Hasanuddin and Martin just arrived. And then from there, he went to Universitas Gadjah Mada in Yogyakarta, and he's also worked in universities in Jambi and Bengkulu. So I'm delighted to introduce Martin. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Pak Howell. And thank you for inviting me. And I'd like to thank Universitas Negeri Jakarta for inviting me to present this webinar today. It's an honor to speak to colleagues at what I knew as IKIP Jakarta in my days in Indonesia. And it's always a pleasure for me to reconnect with friends and colleagues in Indonesia, which is a country I love. And I like to travel there as much as possible. And it's a great regret, of course, that we can't actually travel to each other's countries at the moment. So this is the next best thing, speaking through online in a webinar. So I'll now share my screen with you, my PowerPoint. I hope you can see the title slide, which should read Education Post-Pandemic, the Role of Technology in Motivating Learners in Indonesia and Elsewhere. You may notice a slight change in my title since I sent the title and abstract, in that I'm not going to be talking exclusively about language learning, but I think about learning more generally. And my focus is actually going to be more on learning in higher education, but I think it has some relevance for schools too. I should also say that this is a rather personal view of the topic of technology in education. I will be citing some research and theory, but ultimately it is my own view, and it's based largely on my own experience of online education during the last 18 months of the pandemic. This is an outline of my talk. I'll start by talking about digital technology, or EdTech. I'll use the term EdTech, educational technology, referring to all kinds of digital technology used in education. I'll then just present some research evidence on the effectiveness of educational technology. And then I will focus more specifically on motivation and present METOX, which is a model for analyzing the motivational value of EdTech. It's not my model. It's a product of self-determination theory, which I hope many of you will be familiar with. And I'll then apply the METOX model to the online lecture or webinar, something like this, and discuss the motivational qualities of this kind of event. So, a year ago, 18 months ago, when the pandemic struck, there was initially a lot of optimism about the potential of EdTech to keep education going and maybe even improve it. This is a website from the World Economic Forum, a webpage, April 2020. 18 months ago now, with the headline, "The COVID-19 pandemic has changed education forever. This is how." And the article went on to say how we will never go back, that educational technology is going to disrupt and revolutionize education. Here is another web page from about a year later, March 2021. from Forbes magazine, which, as you'll know, is a global business magazine, with the headline, "The Worst of Times for Online Education." And the article began, "It ought to be the best of times for online education." And it explained how, from a business point of view, the pandemic was a great opportunity for the EdTech industry to showcase its tools and products. It was as if everyone could suddenly try out all the best tools of EdTech, and it would be a fantastic opportunity for the industry. Then the article goes on, "The problem is that the extended trial of online learning has been a dud, a disappointment, a disaster. Turns out most people don't like online learning. Based on overwhelming public response, remote online learning is a lousy product." Okay, an extreme point of view, but it is striking how different this view is from the optimism of a year previously. Teachers' views about online education. Of course, the vast majority of teachers all over the world have been glad to be able to keep working using digital technology. We are still able to teach. Researchers have been able to research thanks to online technology. So we're very grateful to Google, Microsoft, and the rest for providing us with these tools. An article a research article from Indonesia by Lee et al. Is an example. I've got some references at the end. And this article reports on Indonesian teachers' views that at least they are glad to be able to keep working. They still are able to keep working and get their salaries and so on. So obviously, EdTech has been a great blessing during the pandemic. However, the Forbes magazine article goes on to report on a separate survey released on March the 1st, 2021 by McKinsey & Co, which asked teachers what they thought of teaching online over the past year. On a 10-point scale, where 10 was equivalent to in-person learning, American teachers gave their online experience a score of just 3.5. So teachers may be glad to be able to keep working, but in general, they don't think that online teaching is equivalent to the real thing. Of course, as soon as we can, many schools around the world have actually gone back to a regular face-to-face teaching. And that's true in the UK now. Schools, my daughters are at a local secondary school, and life is pretty much back to normal. No masks, no social distancing in classes. They are being taught by actual teachers in the classroom. And of course, there's still some digital technology being used, but it's pretty much back to normal as it was pre-pandemic. This is not the case in universities, though. In my university, I'm still mainly working at home. There is some face-to-face teaching, but only in socially distanced seminar groups. And students have protested about this, and their parents as well, who are often paying their fees. Here is a article from British newspaper in July. Student fury as universities plan to continue online teaching into 2022. And it's true that my university, Leeds, is planning to continue a kind of hybrid model into next year as well. And the reason for this is partly health, well, ostensibly health and safety, in that they believe it's still necessary to maintain social distancing, and therefore there isn't enough space on campus to host large-scale lectures as previously. But also, cynically, some people have said that the reason is because they actually want to continue providing for international students who are reluctant to come to the UK. Although actually from January, all international students are required to be on campus. But still, universities are planning to continue with a hybrid model with no face-to-face large-scale lectures. Instead, lectures will be online. Not that different from Zoominars like this. And students in general have not appreciated this. Of course, there are benefits because they don't have to show up to class, and they can watch, if the lecturer is if the lecture is recorded, they can watch it more than once. So there are advantages which most recognize, but at least they feel they should be getting a refund or a reduction in their fees because it's not equivalent to face-to-face teaching, they argue. Okay, these are I've mostly reported media attitudes and views so far. What is the research evidence about on the successes or failures of online education during the pandemic? Well, I haven't done a full literature review, and anyway, it's probably too early to judge outcomes. And there is a lot of research that is being done and is being written up. I expect there will be a lot of research published in the next year or two. But my impression from quick survey of publications that are already out is that the results are pretty mixed. So I'll just let you read. Here's the title of one article. Which is obviously reporting quite positive results, but then here's another reporting negative impacts. I do have some evidence from two of my own doctoral students who are carrying out research at the moment. One in China and one in Indonesia. And I'd just like to report what they have found. So Weidu is carrying out a case study of online teaching in provincial Chinese primary school and the junior middle school. And he carried out the case study last year when the pandemic forced all schools to close. And he observed online classes, interviewed teachers, learners, and parents. And just very briefly to summarize his results, he found high levels of dissatisfaction among all parties. That is, from teachers, learners, and the parents, regarding the levels of learner engagement in the sessions, in their lessons. Difficulties teachers reported in monitoring individuals and their learning. And not surprisingly, technical problems in delivering lessons. And the fact that there was a digital divide evident. Some learners in more prosperous households had the tools, they had good Wi-Fi connections, they had laptops, whereas other students were forced to borrow their grandmother's mobile phone, for example, to take part in lessons. So there was the inequalities were very evident. This is a very small scale study, but it's just an indication that things weren't ideal, were far from ideal in this corner of China. Turning to an Indonesian study, my student Karomawati she carried out a pilot study last semester, tracking students' participation in an online English course, an MKU course, at a Javanese university. And she found that the students, during their online lessons, were making minimal contributions, either voice contribution or in the chat. They did make some contributions in Bahasa Indonesia, but hardly any in English at all. And so the sessions were generally even more teacher-centered than regular classes would have been. And the interviews that she did with the students suggested that they had a very low willingness to communicate. Because they felt socially awkward, they didn't feel comfortable, they didn't really feel that they were getting to know their classmates, and so they were less willing to interact with them. They didn't even feel they knew the teacher, and so they were shy about talking with them. And she also felt that the teacher was, the tasks that the teacher was giving were not really conducive to encouraging contributions from the learners. Perhaps that was just an experience with the software that they were using. So this is just a glimpse of two instances of online education during the pandemic, where we do have some results, and that it's not a positive picture that they're presenting. However, I do want to reiterate that digital technology has been a great blessing during the pandemic. And of course, more generally, it is essential for distance education. It has a crucial role. That is, especially in a country like Indonesia, digital technology is crucial in serving remote regions of the country and in facilitating international connections like this one, this Zoominar. We couldn't be communicating at all if it wasn't for digital technology. So it's maintained education provision during the pandemic in most contexts, not everywhere in the world, but certainly in middle and higher income countries. During this time, teacher digital proficiency has increased, facilitating new modes of learning. So we've all become familiar with these tools like Zoom and Teams, and we've learned, for example, to create breakout rooms, to do a bit of group work, perhaps using Padlets, for example, or polling. Most teachers have improved their skills with digital technology and feel more comfortable now. I should also stress just how vital digital technology is in language learning. In my field of English learning, I think it's really crucial, and it is a big factor in why the competence of young people in English in countries like Indonesia, especially cities like Jakarta or Bandung or Surabaya, why their competence has increased so much over the last 10, 20 years. And I'd just like to plug my own article, Lamandari Sandi 2020, where we looked at the online use of English and its impact on motivation to learn. So young people in Jakarta are accessing English outside the class through the internet. They're listening to songs, they're watching videos in English, and this is really good for their developing their English skills. And at all levels. Here's a picture of me with someone I met about a month ago, a little boy in Jakarta, aged 9. whose grandmother actually, had got in touch with me because she knew I was interested in English in Indonesia. And she introduced her grandson, who at the age of 9 was fluent in English. His competence was astonishing. And I had a Zoom call with him where he told me about the English websites, especially the films and the cartoons and the games that he was playing online, and that had enabled him to learn English. And his parents were homeschooling him because his English was so advanced. I actually encouraged the parents to actually get him into a local school, because I didn't think carrying on with homeschooling was a good thing. But clearly the digital technology, he had educated himself through digital technology, and this is the future. So what's the problem? What am I complaining about here? Well, I think at the moment there is a tension in schools and universities between the ed tech enthusiasts, those who want us to keep using digital technology, continue once there is no need for further social distancing. They would like us to provide hybrid education. There's a tension between them and the rest of us who are simply not so enthused about technology, and who find we have a motivational deficit often when trying to use online technology for teaching and learning. And I'm going to elaborate on this by looking at motivational theory in a moment. However, because of this motivational deficit, I'm just going to pause for 1 minute and do some stretching. And I would like to ask you for 1 minute to maybe stand up and do some stretching, just to invigorate to renew your motivation for listening to me. So if you wouldn't mind just standing up, maybe doing some stretches for 1 minute. That's what I'm doing now. You don't want to stand up, you could at least move your arms and legs. My physiotherapist told me it's necessary to do this every 15 minutes, especially when we spend so much time hunched over our desks looking at a screen. Okay, thank you. I hope you're now a little bit more motivated to keep listening to me for the remaining 15 minutes of my talk. So, I'm just going to talk a little bit about self-determination theory as the most dominant theory of motivation in the field of education. I know that many of you will be familiar with self-determination theory. And if not, I strongly recommend Ryan and Dece's classic article of 2000, which is in the references. Self-determination theory is the theory that introduced intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So when we enjoy doing something, we're intrinsically motivated to act and more likely to engage fully than if we're extrinsically motivated. That is, if we're doing it not because we enjoy something, but because we're feeling we have to do it. Extrinsic motivation, though, can be more or less internalized. So less internalized motivation is when we do something because we've been told to do it, or someone has threatened us with punishment if we don't do it. More internalized is when we're doing it because we identify with the activity. Maybe not because we enjoy it actually, but because we feel that it's us, we should do it. The example that I always give here is jogging, which I do sometimes. I try to do it once a week. I don't really enjoy jogging, but I do think it's good for me. I think it's important activity, and I like to think of myself as a jogger, or at least a sportsman. So I do it. Internalized motivation is just as good as intrinsic motivation for making us engaged with something and putting effort into something. Whether our motivation is intrinsic and internalized depends, according to a self-determination theory, on how far 3 basic psychological needs are satisfied. And these needs are competence, autonomy, relatedness. And I'll just let you read the definitions of each one. Now, if we think about these 3 needs in relation to digital technology, for autonomy, we might ask, does the technology serve my own purposes? Is it giving me a sense of autonomy? Does it give me choices to suit my own preferences, my preferred way of learning? Does it match my goals? Is it going to serve my goals? With competence, does the technology make me feel competent? Am I gaining mastery over something? Do I get a sense of progress as I use the technology? And for relatedness, does the technology enable me to connect with others and make satisfying relationships? You know, if we can answer yes to all these questions, then the technology, we are going to use the technology. We're going to want to use the technology often. We're going to persist with it because it is satisfying these basic psychological needs that we all have. If the answer is no to some of these questions, then we're unlikely to engage with it for long. We might reject it, or we might use it in a less effective way. Now, this theory has been applied by self-determination theorists to the experience of using technology. And I would refer you to this article by Peters, Calvo, and Ryan from 2018. And they break technology down into 4 elements. So there's the interface with the technology, that is the way that we actually interact with it, like with Zoom or Teams, we look at a screen and we have the interface that we use, the screen, the tabs, and so on. There's the tasks, the things that it actually does, the things that it affords us, that we can do with it. And then there's the sort of behavior that it enables us to do that we wouldn't be able to do without it. So in this case, for example, with Zoom, I'm able to give a lecture and then hopefully later to interact with you, to have a kind of conversation. We can chat as well with each other. So we can do these things using Zoom. But then there's also the broader aspect of how it then might change our lives, our working lives or our personal lives. And they in the article, Peters et al. Present this METUX model, that is motivation, engagement, and thriving in the technology user experience. That's the acronym metalks, where they relate these aspects of technology, the user experience, with the basic psychological needs. And I'm going to apply this model now to this actual use of technology. So using Zoom or Teams or other platforms for online lectures, or let's say Zoominars, like the one we're doing now. And I'd just like to think about this in terms of the four aspects, the four spheres of experience, as they say, and consider whether it is satisfying our basic psychological needs or not. So I've given tick for where I think the answer is yes, it does satisfy our basic psychological needs, and a cross for where I think it's at least questionable whether our needs are being met, and therefore whether it is providing a motivational, engaging experience for us. So I'll concentrate on the X's and skate over the ticks, but I do acknowledge that there are definitely benefits from using this technology. So the interface, for example, we're now all familiar with it. We're all familiar with Zoom, I think, and this does provide a sense of competence. It feels good that we can just go on Zoom and within 5 minutes we are talking to 141 people in this case. That's great. That's motivating for me, and I get a sense of competence from that. We can switch our microphone and video on and off, at least you, the participants, can. You know, if you want to do something else. So that gives you a sense of autonomy, perhaps. However, we can't deny that this interface is not quite the same as face-to-face, a face-to-face context. And this, I think, is a challenge. This isn't fully satisfying for our sense of autonomy, competence, or certainly our sense of relatedness. It lacks the immediacy that we get from being in a room with other people. And I'm aware that this is a big psychological field, actually an academic field, which I'm not fully familiar with myself. So I'm just observing, really, from a personal experience point of view, that this interface lacks immediacy, vibrancy, vividness. The tasks that we can do, obviously there is a range of tasks that something like Teams or Zoom affords us, but there isn't quite the variety or choice that we get in a face-to-face context, where, for example, if I was speaking to you at a live conference, I would almost certainly have asked you to do a little bit of group work, to chat to your neighbor about some aspect of what I was talking about. It's less easy to do that with Zoom. Clearly, there is less direct contact with other people. I can't see you. I can see one or two of you on the screen in little boxes, but I can't make eye contact with you. That is surely significant in our communication and in how well I am communicating to you and how motivated you are to carry on listening to me. And maybe affecting how well you can grasp my meaning or sense my emotion. And of course, it's very easy for you to be distracted. I can't be distracted, but I've got to stay on task. But you can easily go off task if you want, which inevitably threatens your engagement in the event. Turning to the behavior, the kind of things that we can do, the learning behavior. Obviously, to some extent, we can create a relationship here. I've said hello to my old friend Howell, which I'm very glad of, and I'm glad to be introduced to some new colleagues here. But and I hope that I'm building knowledge and providing some exposure to new ideas. However, I would argue that the learning experience is shallower. Again, this is controversial. There are some people who would argue it isn't any shallower, and that learning online is can be just as deep. But certainly, I think there is less incidental learning in an online environment than in face-to-face. There's less chance for you to have a chat with your neighbor, for example, asking, what did he mean by that? What did he just say? Or just to exchange ideas or even off-topic ideas with other people. So less incidental learning. Participation is less visible. And I think that although you are participating here, it's not providing the same validation of professional identity as an actual conference would. So turning up to a conference, turning up to a lecture is a way of validating your identity as a academic or as a postgraduate student or an undergraduate student. And just clicking on your computer, making a few clicks on your computer and taking part in this Zoominar doesn't quite do the same thing. And if we just turn to the life aspects, obviously technology like this is allowing institutions like ours to keep functioning. I don't know what would have happened without this technology during the pandemic, when we were all told to stay at home. 20 years ago, maybe we just couldn't have continued learning and teaching. So it's allowed us to keep going. But has it undermined our sense of belonging to that institution by just interacting online? I feel it has. So I'd like to draw to a close now by summarizing what my message here. Online lectures, webinars, and other EdTech are vital tools for distance education and will be essential in any future emergency. Let's hope we don't have one. We don't have another pandemic, but if we do, we've all learned a lot this last 18 months, and we're going to continue developing these digital tools. That's great. However, the persistence of online lectures and lessons as part of a hybrid offer, as my university calls it, in regular education may, I argue, undermine learners' long-term motivation, i.e. making it more extrinsic. So students will continue learning, but because they feel they ought to or they're told to, rather than because they are getting satisfaction from the process. It might reduce learner engagement in the short term. Obviously, this is debatable, but I believe that it probably is doing on balance. And it may inhibit achievement of existing learning outcomes. So the learning outcomes that we currently hope for. Of course, we could change those learning outcomes to make them more relevant for online learning, but that's another matter. Certainly, we need to monitor participant engagement and student achievement very closely through research. And I would just like to finish with the observation that, as the ancient Greeks knew, and the Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky reminded us, the best way to learn is to have a conversation with another person in their physical presence. I think that's always been true, and it remains true today. Terima kasih atas perhatian Anda. I'd be very grateful to hear your comments and queries now. I'll just leave this screen up so you can take any reference. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. Really interesting, lots of ideas that are new to me, and I'm sure they'll be new to many other the participants here. If you would like to ask a question, can you put it in the chat box, please? I should have said this at the beginning, I'm sorry. So while you're thinking of your questions and writing them in the chat box, I'd like to begin, Martin, with one question, just for clarification. Could you say a bit more about what you mean by validation of professional identity? Martin, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, so shall I stop sharing the screen and then?
Yeah.
I mean that whenever we take part in a professional activity, such as going to a lecture, if you're a student, or teaching, if you're a teacher, you are being a teacher or being a student. If you're doing that physically together, I think your identity as a teacher or as a student is being validated. There's a certain thrill involved. We all, as teachers, we get a sense of adrenaline from actually active teaching. As you know, I feel excited to talk to you now, but if I was in the room with you and I had 100+ pairs of eyes looking at me, I would feel even more kind of excited to be talking to you. And I think you would, as participants, would get a stronger sense of being in an academic seminar if we were together in a room. I think perhaps also that another aspect of this, if I may just continue, Hull, is that when at a university, students come to university partly to learn about a subject like English or maths or science, but it's not just about knowledge, it's about seeing a scientist or a mathematician or an English teacher or an English speaker and user. And they learn what a mathematician is like, or a historian or whatever, by being in their presence and listening to them talk and almost sort of seeing them think about their subject. I think we're losing that in online.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Thanks, Martin. I can see a couple of questions from Sharon. Sharon, would you like to tell us what your question is, please, or your comment?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Martin. Very interesting and very clear. I particularly like the METOX model that you introduced, but I wonder, when your PhD students reported that online tasks seem to be more ineffective, isn't this more a case of people's lack of familiarity, both with the context and with the different strategies that can be used in blended learning? So perhaps the need here is more for professional development rather than predicting ineffective teaching online.
Thank you, Sharon. I missed a key point there. I've told my internet connection was unstable, which is part of the problem, of course, in many contexts, that the technology doesn't quite work as planned. And I think what you were suggesting was that if we were all skilled in using these digital tools and they worked perfectly well, then online education would be just as effective as face-to-face. Was that?
Yeah, no, not exactly, because I don't know if it's just as effective as face-to-face, because as you say, they're so different. But I think that there's a very clear difference between ERT, emergency remote teaching and blended learning. They're not the same thing. And I think that half the problem is that the vast majority of teachers, both in schools and in higher education, were thrown into this situation and didn't have any preparation for it at all. So perhaps with more professional development, learning how to use the resources, training to teach in digital contexts in the same way as someone might train to work in face-to-face on-site contexts, I think is really important, and it's something that people are doing. But over the past, throughout the pandemic, obviously, because people teachers already have the skills to teach, but they don't know how to use the technology, then the focus has often been on how to use resources, how to use Padlet, how to use this, and not on a principled approach to learning design for blended learning contexts. So I think one important direction, if EdTech is to be effective in the future, is professional development.
Yeah, I take your point, and I from a motivational point of view, it's very clear that when in distance education, students usually have chosen, they know what they're getting into. They know that, they've chosen to do a distance course. So they are, they're intrinsically or internally motivated from the start. And as you point out, during the pandemic, many of us have just been, most of us have been forced to use this technology. So we're starting from a sort of extrinsic motivational point. And I guess the question is, though, sort of going forward, how willing are people to continue using this technology? And that remains an open question. But thanks. Yeah, I think you make a very valid point.
Thanks, Martin. We've not got much time left, and the people are queuing up to ask questions. Ibu Rina, can you tell us what your question is, please? Ibu Rina?
Yes, Mr. Howell.
Go on.
Pardon me, I do not turn on my camera because of something. Okay, thank you very much for your questions. Dr. Martin, my name is Rina. Someone ever told me that utilize technology to encourage or influence motivation in learning is a logical fallacy. So what do you think about this statement? And this little bit worrying because when we would like to conduct a research that involves technology, since this kind of technology judged as a device that is like a logical fallacy when we would like assumes that technology can help or increase the motivations in learning. That's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rina. That's an interesting argument. I've never heard that technology per se cannot logically motivate people. I'd be interested to just know what you mean by a logical fallacy. Do you mean that technology cannot motivate anyone to do anything?
In my opinion, such as Zoom, the existence of Zoom, it can help us to get interactions between us, between a teacher and the students, right? When we do a teaching or learning process, that one, in my personal opinion. But someone told me, this is kind of a professor told me that when we think about that technology is something or device can help or increase the students' motivations is a logical fallacy. So
okay. I would have to disagree with your professor with respect, because just to give a little example, I during the pandemic, I bought myself a digital watch which enables me to time my jogging, and gives me lots of interesting statistics about my jogging. And that certainly motivated me to go jogging more. And I know, for example, I've heard of many other people who use apps like Duolingo to learn languages, and that it's actually helping them, it's motivating them to learn the language. So I don't think that there is anything about technology that that innately demotivates. No. It's just a question of using the technology appropriately in the right context at the right time.
All right, thank you, Dr. Martin. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we've got about 2 minutes left. There's an interesting question from Ibu Arita. Ibu Arita, you there?
Yes, thank you very much for the insightful presentation, Dr. Martin. I was just wondering, actually, what do you think is the main difference from the school from home experience in the UK and the developing countries? And also, what is exactly the main component we need to put more focus on to overcome students' potential public speaking anxiety in an online class settings? Because we have an observation that sometimes motivation isn't the only reason why students fail to excel in class. Rather, their confidence is the main hindrance. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for your, two questions there. Thank you. The first question about the difference between school and home experience in the UK and developing countries, I can't really comment because I don't know exactly what happened in other countries because I was stuck in the UK the last 18 months. Can I just address your second question about the issue of confidence? Okay. I do agree that the confidence, I've observed from my many years of working in Indonesia that confidence is a big issue for learners of English. And I think we need to sort of continue working on this about, whether students could have more confidence to use English online compared to in face-to-face settings or less. I think that's an open question. My PhD student, Corrie, is investigating this very issue in her doctoral research. So I may be able to say something more about that when I know her results in about a year's time. But it's certainly a very important issue. So thank you for raising it.
I see. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
I know there are several more people who would like to ask questions. We're over time already. So thanks very much, Martin. Really stimulating talk. And I'm delighted to see that we've had an audience of 140 people for our inaugural session. That's very encouraging. Thank you to everybody for being here. I'd just like to tell you a bit about our next session, which will be on the 11th of November at the same time. The speaker is Professor Fauzia Shamim from Ziauddin University in Karachi. And her topic will be the effects of digital multimodal communication on language norms, in conventions and use. I know Fauzia very well. She was one of my research students when I was still teaching at the university. And she's done a lot of work on teaching and learning in difficult circumstances. And then the December session will be on the 9th of December at the same time. And the speaker will be Tony Capstick from the University of Reading. And his topic will be using case studies to understand language and migration. A very important topic currently. He's written an extremely important and influential book about language and migration, which came out, I think, last year, but people are talking about it a lot. So thank you again. Oh, and for the next semester, which our next session will be in February, we'll continue until June. We already have one confirmed speaker, Subhan Zain from the Australian National University in Canberra. But I'll circulate the program for semester 2 when it's completed. Thank you again to everyone for your participation, and especially to Martin. Thanks a lot. Goodbye until next session.
Thank you, Martin. Baik, terima kasih Haywol. Sudah
Terima kasih.
selesai satu session, mudah-mudahan menarik untuk kita banyak dengar lagi.
Saya rasa 40 orang lumayan ya.
Ya, banyak sekali. Ya mudah-mudahan ini menjadi sesuatu menginspirasi kita untuk melakukan sesuatu. Karena apa yang dilakukan oleh Martin sebetulnya dia melakukan observasi ya, Haywol ya. Terhadap bagaimana penggunaan teknologi dalam pandemiknya. Sebetulnya kan banyak juga pertanyaan-pertanyaan kita di sekitar itu ya. Tapi kita bagaimana memformulasikan bagaimana kita memformulasikan pertanyaan itu menjadi sesuatu bahan riset ya, Haywol ya.
Saya kira pertanyaannya Ibu Arita itu penting. Apakah ada perbedaan antara situasi di Inggris dengan di Indonesia?
Di Indonesia, ya.
Saya kira dari apa yang saya amati dari pengalaman anaknya teman-teman yang masih SD, cara mengajarnya terdiri dari guru hanya mengajukan pertanyaan, memberi tugas, siswa tidak bicara sama sekali, mereka pulang mengerjakan tugas, terus jawabannya dikirim kepada guru, terus guru mengevaluasi benar atau salah, itu saja. Jadi guru sepertinya tidak mengajar lagi, menurut yang saya amati.
Ya artinya banyak sekali yang bisa kita lakukan ya, menjadi pertanyaan bagi kita juga ya, untuk menjadi sesuatu yang perlu kita lihat ya. Secara katakanlah secara penelitian kita melihatnya seperti apa gitu ya, dari berbagai perspektif. Cara belajar menggunakan online system. Tidak hanya di dalam bahasa Inggris ya, tapi juga dalam mata pelajaran yang lain gitu. Dan juga mungkin juga kita bisa melihatnya juga dari kebiasaan kita selama ini gitu. Bagaimana kita menyikapi keadaan sekarang.
Oke.
Menarik. Oke.
Ya. Sukses.
Sukses. Mudah-mudahan bisa menginspirasi untuk kita selalu ingin mendengar.
Ya. Martin sudah keluar.
Martin kayaknya sudah keluar.
Iya.
Sudah ada Martin.
Oke.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Haywol. Thank you.
Atau panduan aturan turunan